a sophisticated property developer since the early 2000s, say. It must have been a real shock for you when the world went to hell in a handbasket. How did you survive?
Interesting times. It was like someone flicked the switch. I think most developers will have had a similar experience to mine. We felt, I must say, the boom years were wonderful years. The economy had this momentum that seemed like it would have no end. But as a South African, having had the background that I had, a country through transition, I lived through all of the years, the apartheid years, as well as the release of Nelson Mandela and the subsequent years. We had a cycle of every 7 years or so, South Africa would go through a recession. So when we were going through this boom, I kept saying to myself, how long is this going to last? We need to be careful. So we started to reduce our exposure to the banks. I got very nervous. Banks in Portugal were very free with their funding, and it started to make me nervous. As a businessman, it's normally the businessman that's asking for the finance. It's not the bank that's offering you the finance. And it became that banks would come and knock on your door and say, I hear you're developing, we would like to give you money. So we started to say no, we started to reduce our exposure. But most certainly we felt that there was another year left in this cycle that we were looking at. So they flicked the switch, and it was quite eerie. The next day you came back into the office. It really happened with the announcement of the American bank that went bankrupt. And it was almost like a sense that, wow, where do we go from here? I think most people believed that the recession would be a year, 18 months, and they would be okay. And then through the press, we started to get the announcements that the Portuguese government was actually in trouble, because the Portuguese business sector wasn't in this position. Our story was a very different one from Spain and most certainly Greece at the time. The Portuguese had invested very heavily in infrastructure, in schooling, in roads, in hospitals, this kind of thing, which got them into trouble again because funding was so easy. The Portuguese government had expanded to a degree that it was not manageable. So we had a good year of this trying to work out, which secretly, I must say, as business people, we were looking and thinking, thank God, at least hopefully through this experience, a lot of things are going to be simplified and made easier. The result is that was the case. The Simplex program, which the government had already put into action at the time, suddenly got fast-tracked. Programs like the Golden Residence program, the tax incentive programs, these kind of programs were pushed through very quickly through Parliament. So we felt that the whole market started to become a lot more business friendly, although the economic conditions didn't allow us to benefit from them yet. But certainly the laws were changing in a positive way. Something that we had always been lobbying for as property owners was the change of the rental laws. It was really difficult to get somebody out of your property who wasn't paying rent pre this period, and one of the first requirements from the union in exchange for this funding was that they needed to change the rental laws, and that they did very quickly. Today, Portugal has a very friendly, investor-friendly rental system which works. Businesses became a lot easier to function. Most certainly when we first started the business in Portugal, it took us months to register just the company, just so that you could start trading. Whereas today you can register a company in 30 minutes. It's done on the internet. The next day the registration appears and bang, you're in business. And that applies to all the different categories, VAT, all of these things. So it made business a lot easier. But yes, going back to those years, interesting times, looking around, wondering, we decided as a company strategically to look for niche markets. So we're very successful. We moved away from the British market to a certain degree as finance became less available for them. We were very successful in the Benelux countries, very much so, in Belgium, in the Netherlands. We've been very successful in that market. Portugal is attractive for them to eventually retire. There are some tax programs or incentives for Belgians to come and live in Portugal. So we focused on that market and we were very successful. Today, I would say a good 50% of the construction that we do is directly related to that market specifically. And then we started to look at other markets. We had a short time in the Russian market, but the Golden Residence program is the one that pushed us into much further afield, probably markets that we may not have considered before. We are very successful in the South African market. We have a lot of South African investors and Asian investors as well. We've done very well in that market, yeah.